From the KSL Broadcast House, this is Sunday Edition with Doug Wright.
Thank you for joining us this morning. Once again, Sunday Edition, at least on my end, coming from my home in Holiday, Utah. The whole country has been mesmerized and on the edge of the proverbial seats regarding Gabby Petito. But in looking at that case, it brings up a lot of questions about others who are missing, including BIPOC women. For those not familiar with the acronym, it's Black, Indigenous Peoples of Color. And hundreds are missing, and so little attention seems to have been paid to them. We'll talk with a Utah State representative about that arena and that part of the story as well. But of course, we're also looking at the Tabernacle Choir on Temple Square, once again rehearsing in the Conference Center and the Tabernacle. Once again, will be appearing live at several of the sessions of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints General Conference. So we'll talk with the second counselor in the new choir presidency. That's coming up on the program as well. But I'm very pleased to welcome my friend Boyd Matheson, and we look like we are potentially heading toward another government shutdown. And Boyd has actually had the experience of being in Washington, D.C., in the halls of government when a government shutdown occurred. And Boyd, maybe you can take us back to those days in 2014 when you were the chief of staff for Senator Mike Lee. What does a shutdown look like from the inner sanctum, as it were?
Well, the halls get a little bit more echoey as there aren't as many staffers running around on that. But for most Americans, it doesn't look that much different at all because all of the critical services continue to be done. Often it's the political points that are trying to be scored. You may remember from 2014 how the government actually took out barricades to put around outdoor monuments so that the public would know that there was a shutdown going on. And so for most Americans, that really doesn't have a whole lot of impact. It is a lot of political posturing, and sadly, most of it is completely unnecessary. If we could just get our members of Congress to just follow the Constitution, get a budget, follow the budget, pay the bills, it's really a pretty simple process.
Prior to going on the air, you and I were talking about this, and I wonder how many of the just good old American tax-paying voters out there realize that when that ceiling is lifted, and so we can go more into debt. Now, that doesn't sound like an ideal circumstance for most of us, but it's a reality. We are doing nothing more. We're not buying anything new. We're not going after big programs and pork barreling or anything. We're just arranging to pay for the debt, the checks that are already written and are already in the mail.
Yeah, and already spent for the most part. That's all funding that we've spent. We have $29 trillion now in debt in this country. And so raising the debt ceiling only allows us to borrow so that we can basically service the debt. We can make the interest payment on that debt. It's not new spending. It's not new programs. It's nothing that's going to put steel and concrete in the ground in terms of some of these infrastructure bills. This is just simply, it's like you had your credit card maxed out and you couldn't make your minimum monthly payments, so you asked them to raise your credit limit just a little bit, just so you can make the payments on what you've already spent. We still owe it. We still have to pay it. It doesn't do anything in terms of moving the country forward.
As we look back on, sadly, the quite a few government shutdowns, the first one I really started paying attention to back in the Newt Gingrich days, and the shoe has been on both sides of the aisle on this, so nobody's skirts are clean here. But the last one was under President Trump, and there was that shutdown right at the end and the beginning of an old and new year. And I know some people that looked at that, some people say, well, gosh, okay, government shut down for a few days, we at least save some money. Well, they figure that shutdown cost at least $3 billion in economic activity. So is anything gained at all by a government shutdown?
No, it really isn't, and I'm with you on this one. We could be equal opportunity offenders. Both the left and the right have gone after this for years, and they're both spending out of control. It's something where I wish the national government would look to what we do here in the state of Utah and what Americans do every day when you sit around the kitchen table and you figure out how much is coming in and how much is going out and prioritize spending. And to me, this is one of those opportunities. I think if Democrats really want to focus on being the party of the little guy sky, they should do an audit of all of the government programs that touch someone in poverty to make sure there's no waste, fraud, or abuse, and that they're actually getting outcomes that are making it better. And if Republicans want to talk about welfare reform, they should start with corporate welfare reform and all the perks and breaks that are going to the wealthy and the well-connected. And so it's time for a different kind of conversation. It's not left or right. This is an American issue. And one thing that's really important, Doug, one of our military leaders has said that one of the greatest national security threats we have in this country is our national debt, and it's not getting any better.
Yeah. I can remember when Mitt Romney was running for the presidency and he was opining about the debt. At the time, I think we were talking a mere 15 to 17 trillion dollars. But he said, imagine, and I actually heard you talk about this on your radio program with Jay Evenson the other day, and imagine, we're at rock bottom interest rates. I have never in my lifetime seen them this low. As a matter of fact, I'm refinancing this house right now because they are so low and have gone even lower. But imagine if the interest rates went back to even a 30-year average. Can you imagine the amount of interest on $29 trillion at 5, 6, 7%.
Yeah, and that's a scary thought because, as you said, if it goes up to just an average, not a big spike, we would be paying over $1 trillion a year just in the interest payment on that. And there's no way to get out of that. You can't tax your way out of that. You couldn't even confiscate all the money from the wealthy to fix that big of a hole. And then sadly, the only other option then is to print more money, which then will run away with inflation. And who does that hurt the most? It's not the wealthy and the well-connected. It actually hurts the poor, the middle class, and the most vulnerable among us the most. And that's the sad choice that we're moving towards. And there's just no way you can tax your way through that. You hear a lot of popular bumper stickers in terms of, well, we can just tax the rich and that will take care of it. I think Senator Ben Sass from Nebraska got it right, said this is a tax on the young. And I would actually say it's even worse than that. This is the ultimate in taxation without representation. We are actually doing a tax on the yet to be born who are going to have to help clean up all of this financial mess that we are in right now as a country.
Let's try to get realistic for a second here. What is likely to happen? I mean, everybody from, Dr. Fauci on down or up have said this is a terrible time for a government shutdown in the middle of a pandemic. We're just in some areas of the country. Utah's fared fairly well financially, but we're just bouncing back. So what is likely to happen here? It's awfully hard for me, and maybe I'm being the eternal optimist, but it's awfully hard for me to believe that next week sometime we would actually shut down the government of the United States of America under these circumstances. So what is likely?
Yeah, I think you're going to see a lot of political posturing over the next couple of days, and then I think you will see the debt limit will be raised, government will be kept open. My guess is they'll do something of a short term in nature that will probably get us spending, I don't know, till about Christmas, when they always like to have these kind of battles. And you'll hear lots of words around cliffs and crisis and catastrophe, but I don't think that's going to happen in the end. It'll be mostly political posturing. It's also important to remember that even with the debt limit, there is a lot of income coming into the government. It's the fall. It's when most of the revenue comes in from corporations. And so even if it takes them a few extra days, there's still enough money coming into the system that the debt will be serviced. The U.S. government is not going to default or become insolvent. It will keep moving along. They'll get this thing negotiated out over the next week, and then they can go back to trying to figure out what they're going to do about infrastructure and a host of other items on the political agenda.
Boyd, I always enjoy our conversations. Thank you so much for joining us today on Sunday Edition. That was Boyd Matheson with us here on the program today. Let's take a brief break, and when we come back, we're going to talk with Representative Angela Romero. We're going to talk about persons of color who haven't exactly, when they go missing, haven't exactly had the same coverage that a recent case has had. We'll get into that. Welcome back to Sunday Edition. I have some statistics here I want to get just right. So this was a study by the Urban and Indian Health Institute. They recently found that 95% of Indigenous women who go missing never receive any media coverage. This statistic, too, goes back a little ways. 2010, the U.S. Department of Justice report found that Native American women are 10 times more likely to be murdered on some reservations, and Utah and Salt Lake rank in the top 10. In light of the Gabby Petito situation, where so much focus was on that particular case, you can't help but ask the question, while we were all so heartbroken at the ultimate outcome there, and it still is unfolding as we speak, but it makes you wonder why some cases get so much attention, other cases get virtually, if not in reality, none at all. Representative Angela Romero is joining us on the line right now from the Utah State Legislature. Angela, welcome. Is there an answer in any way, shape or form to that question? Why do some of these cases, especially with BIPOC women, Black, Indigenous, people of color, why do they not get any, in some cases, media attention?
That's why I proposed the task force. I was approached by Restoring Ancestral Winds, which is a nonprofit that specifically focuses on Native American individuals that are experiencing domestic violence and sexual assault. And they wanted to bring more coverage to the murdered and missing Indigenous women and two-spirited community. And so they asked me to run a resolution in 2019. And so when I ran that resolution, just acknowledging that this is an epidemic, then I knew I had enough support to form the task force. We passed another bill in 2020 and then extended it in 2021 because COVID didn't allow us to meet with our tribal community members and others because of just for safety reasons. And really, before Restoring Ancestral Winds brought this to my attention, it was something I had never thought about myself. And so I think we all have biases. I think that we all are socialized a certain way. And so I don't think that it's intentional at times, but I think what happened in Wyoming and Utah, it opened up the community's eyes to say, wait a minute, there are a lot of people that go murdered and missing, and why are we so fixated on this one? Why are people saying, oh, that could be my daughter or my granddaughter? What about the young Black woman who goes missing or the young Indigenous woman that goes missing? So I think this was a reality check for a lot of people in our community.
It's been interesting even in the pop culture. I think of two very popular television shows streaming in one case on Netflix and then also on the Paramount network. That's Yellowstone and then Longmire. Both of them have dealt with this very issue, or it's come up certainly in the conversations and some of the plot lines of those two programs, how especially in this case with Yellowstone and with Longmire, the Indigenous people, how if a woman is being abused, if a woman is kidnapped, or a woman is murdered, it is likely never to be even charged in some cases, much less make the media.
Yeah, I agree with you. And what I I've done a number of interviews regarding this because, as you know, my focus in the legislature is on sexual assault, human trafficking, and domestic violence. And it goes back to some systemic issues. It's like we need to believe women. I tried to pass a bill this last session on affirmative consent, and my colleagues weren't ready for that yet. I'm going to bring that bill back. But what this boils down is we need to believe women. And when we're talking about murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls and two-spirited individuals, we run into a lot of factors that we might not run into with other people who have been murdered and missing. One thing that we have to look at is jurisdiction. We're looking at federal jurisdiction, state jurisdiction, county jurisdiction, and tribal jurisdiction. We're also looking at issues of misidentifying. Native Americans are a racial group, not an ethnic group, and so a lot of times people are being misidentified as well. And so that's why we formed the task force. We don't have all the answers. We want to look at why this is an epidemic within our Indigenous communities, and we want to give closure to many of our families. The one thing that I've heard from families is like, we just want to be believed. We just want someone to know that our loved one that we've seen didn't run away. We want people to know that that loved one that was found dead on the side of the road was probably murdered. And so, again, there are a lot of stereotypes. There's a lot of biases that have been placed in our heads from the beginning of time about who Indigenous people are, who BIPOC people are. And so in order for us to change the way we perceive people, we need to look at our institutions as well. It's not just us as individuals, but it's just what we see on TV every day, how people are portrayed, who's valued and who's not. So these are important questions we all have to ask ourselves.
Angela, just a final quick thought. As you look at the task force and some of the things that you have personally worked for on Utah's Capitol Hill, what will register a success for you when the task force has recommendations, when you move forward? What are some, maybe 2 or 3 things where you'll go, okay, we've really made progress here?
Well, provide more funding for preventative measures when it comes to domestic violence and sexual assault and education, and not putting all the blame on the victims. A lot of times there's a lot of victim shaming, and it frustrates me because women are questioned. You even see with Gabby when she was talking to law enforcement, even when that person made that 911 call, the way that they were treated. And so there's a lot of things that we have to change systematically within our systems of government to make sure that if somebody's reaching out for help, they're getting help. But most important to me is for the families of people who have lost loved ones, who are still missing or who have been murdered. I want them to know that I believe them. For so long, many people within our tribal communities don't feel like they've been believed, don't feel like anyone paid attention to them. And I want them to know as a policymaker, I believe you, and I'm going to do everything I can in my power to help you find closure for the loved one that you lost or a loved one who's still missing.
Angela, I look forward to future conversations on this. Representative Romero, thank you for spending these moments with us on Sunday Edition.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up next, one of the most beloved choirs in the entire world, labeled by President Ronald Reagan as America's choir. What's happening right now with getting back in the saddle, as it were, for the Tabernacle Choir on Temple Square? We'll talk to the second counselor in the choir's presidency coming up next. America's choir, so dubbed by President Ronald Reagan, has been sorely missed, not just here in America, but around the world. It's been about 18 months since we've had a live performance participation in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints General Conference, and of course the Christmas concerts, the Pioneer concerts, and to hear that the choir is beginning rehearsal again and will, in limited numbers, be participating in some of the sessions of General Conference is just a real thrill. And of course, there's a new presidency for the Tabernacle Choir on Temple Square, a little different configuration than we have seen in the past. And we are delighted to have the second counselor in that presidency. And Gary Porter joins us now. President Porter, welcome to Sunday Edition.
Thank you, Doug. It's nice to be with you today. I hope you're doing well.
I'm doing very well, and especially with this good news. And I've joked about this for the years now that I have done Sunday Edition. We're the warm-up act for the Tabernacle Choir, and it's a joy to be on the air just before the choir's traditional broadcast. Maybe you could bring us up to speed, maybe first of all, in the organization that we now have within the leadership of the choir, but also what is anticipated over next weekend's General Conference.
Well, thank you, Doug. In terms of the leadership of the choir, we have President Michael O. Levitt, as you know, who is a wonderful, capable leader, and along with Elder L. Whitney Clayton, a former member of the presidency of the 70 and very capable as well. We're grateful to be able to serve together, and President Levitt has done a lot of work with Bishop Gosset, who's been given the responsibility by the First Presidency to oversee the choir. They have put together a plan along with Dr. Palmer and his medical team to help the choir re-engage. And that plan has been reviewed with the First Presidency and received their approval. And as a consequence, the choir has been given the approval to step into this process in a very gentle and careful way.
The first rehearsals that occurred just in the past week or so were just a joyous moment for the choir members that I happen to know personally. What was it like for the leadership of this beloved choir to actually see them up in the loft and rehearsing beautiful music?
Well, it was a wonderful experience, as you can imagine. We were really anxious to hear how the choir was going to sound at half strength, and we were so pleasantly surprised to hear the strength of the choir. The choir members were so excited. They were full of enthusiasm. They had a wonderful spirit about them, and the spirit of the hymns came through in their singing. And I think that reflects what is going on in their hearts and mind relative to getting back to singing together as a choir. I think it's a...
What are you anticipating? Pardon me, I was just wondering what you're anticipating for the general conference sessions. My understanding is the choir, or parts of the choir, will perform at 2 of the sessions. Is that correct?
Yes, the way it'll work is half the choir will be singing on the Saturday morning session. The other half will be singing on the Sunday morning and Sunday afternoon sessions, and so it'll be a split experience for them. But at least all of the choir members who have been fully vaccinated and who pass a COVID test as they enter the hall will be allowed to go up on the rostrum and participate in the choir. And of course, we've had wonderful success so far with our testing, and so it's been a great experience so far.
President Porter, it's been just a delight to have you with us. We are so looking forward to the live choir being back with us. We're all keeping our fingers crossed for Christmas. I know decisions haven't been made, but a real big thanks to you. And maybe you can join me at the end of this program every single week. It's my pleasure and honor to say Music in the Spoken Word is coming up next here on KSL. Stay with us.